welcome everyone on this new episode of Let's Talk AI. I'm super happy to be here today with Anna Skoulikari. Anna, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm ready to chat.
Awesome. So I was really looking forward to our discussion. We'll talk about many topics. One of the very interesting things is technical writing. You're also writing a book at O'Reilly. You know a lot about Git, but you'll tell us more in a few seconds. Maybe for the people who might not know you, could you just introduce yourself in a few words?
Yeah. So, like you mentioned, I work as a technical writer by day currently, and I also recently wrote a book teaching Git. And in general, I've taught Git through online courses as well and workshops. And before that, I've had a really varied career in tech. I've also worked as a UX designer and a front end developer, and we can get into that tech journey if you want. Yeah, and I can talk a little bit about how all that happened.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. We'll be less focused on AI, maybe per se, but I think everything tech related and understanding like technical writing and so on is very useful in tech career in general. And so in the podcast, we try to cover a lot of everything is related to AI. And by that, I think AI is just a little piece, but you have like the entire data management, data governance, and data engineering part, and then you have like many things related to that, like technical writing, building documentation, Git. Of course, every developer use Git, either data engineers, software engineers, but like everyone related to projects, so data scientists, MLOps, and so on and so on, TI/CD, and so on. All right, I'll stop naming things. Awesome. Could we maybe do? So first of all, I think I'd like to ask you about what are you trying to achieve today, or what's your state of the art, like I like to say. And by that, I mean not technologically, but what are you looking into these days? What are you working on? If you can share, where is your interest at right now?
I think my interest is always at taking complex topics and explaining them in a simple way, whether that's technology or any other topic that I might explore. And that's also kind of what I do with my day job in part,
Mhm.
which is, yeah, try to make more complex things simple. That's really broad, but that is kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, so making complex things simple. Okay. So this is your mission, and now I'd love to make a little retrospective on what you've been doing, your journey. So if you can take us a little bit through like what happened in your career and the
Yeah.
decisions you made and what you learned from those key points, that would be
Mhm.
very helpful.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, the start of my kind of tech career, I'd say, began when I did a UX boot camp. So user experience
Hmm.
design, which is designing apps and websites. Your audience will probably know this already. And this was back in London when I was living in London. And that was fascinating. And I got a job working in an agency as a UX designer. And after a while of working as a UX designer, I got really curious about coding because I felt like as a UX designer, you would make these wireframes and you would create the designs or like the architecture of what a app or website would look like. But I had no idea how the developers would take those designs and actually build them. So, like, I felt like an architect that had no idea how the construction company took those designs and actually built the thing.
Mm.
So that curiosity led me to wanting to learn to code, or at least some of the basics of coding. And at the time, I'd moved to Barcelona and I did a coding boot camp in Barcelona that taught the fundamentals of web development in a 3 to 4 month program. And then after I finished that coding boot camp, I got a job as a front end developer
Hmm.
in a company and worked as a front end dev. And that's kind of where my tech communication, technical writing career started. After I got that job as a front end dev, one of the things I realized is that I really did not know how to use Git well enough in order to work with my colleagues without being terrified of it. So at the coding bootcamp, they had basically taught us Git in like a 30-minute to 1 hour session. And they were like, Git add, Git commit, Git push, off you go. Like, that's enough. And that was it. good enough when you were working on a project on your own in the coding bootcamp. But once I was in an actual work environment and had to do more complex things and collaborate with other people, yeah, I was terrified of Git, and I was terrified of like destroying our repository and taking down the site. So that's when I decided to conquer my fear and to start actually really understanding how Git works. And that's when I realized that the learning resources out there were not really designed for someone like me. They often were geared more towards someone that had been working in the tech space a lot longer, or had a computer science degree, which I didn't have either of those.
Hmm.
So this creative idea came to me of how I could teach Git in a more simple way, and my I wanted to write a book, but I thought that the barrier to entry to um, write a book was quite high, and I thought, let me first make an online course to see whether my teaching approach actually really helps people
Hmm.
and whether it works for them. So I made an online course, put that on Udemy, and then started getting like all this feedback of people saying like, this finally someone that explains Git in a way that I understand. You finally explain things in a much simpler way than I found online. And then basically my journey took me towards like, okay, I think I'm gonna write this book. And at the time, I also transitioned out of front end development and into technical writing because
Mm.
I realized that I had a much better skill in between the space of like tech and communication. I wasn't a really great developer and it didn't come naturally to me, and it wasn't something that I was like, yes, this is where my skills match the
Hmm.
job. But then in technical writing, it's been a much better match for me. So, yeah, that's kind of how I ended up becoming a technical writer, and also how I ended up publishing a book teaching Git with O'Reilly. I mean, there's more to the story, obviously, and we might
Hmm.
delve into it more later. But yeah, that's kind of my journey.
Awesome. Yeah, I love it. I think I'd like to follow up directly on what's technical writing and why is it important.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you my thoughts on what technical writing is in the realm that I work. But at the end of the day, technical writing is something that is super broad. And in each industry, it can be a completely different thing. So
Hmm.
I've only worked as a technical writer in the tech space,
Hmm.
and writing documentation for software products. So technical writing is basically working on documentation. You have a piece of software and you have people that use that piece of software, and you need to explain how they can use this piece of software. So the technical writers are usually the ones that explain that, explain how that works. Um, and you can have like software that's UI. You can also have like an API. So there's API documentation. But yeah, that's basically what technical writers do.
Mm. Hmm. And okay, so I think from the technical writing perspective, and then, well, maybe let's get into the Udemy course and the book. So
Hmm.
I think speaking of personal branding, so you are trying to figure what you liked, and you faced the pain, and so you went all in on what was your worst enemy, which were pushing or doing pull requests. Uh, I assume maybe. So what was the process like to publish a course on Udemy and to like then confirm the idea? Because it's very funny how you just went and built like this kind of proof of concept and iterate from it, and then you went like, okay, this makes sense to me. Let's go big on that, and you wrote a book with O'Reilly. So can you take us through this process and like this I feel like I want to say this project development roadmap, but applied
Yeah.
to your well to your personal project and
Yeah, yeah,
making
yeah,
it
yeah.
grow.
Oh, this is such a good question. I don't think I've been asked this before. So I would have to say, first of all, even though when I was working on the online course, I wanted to write a book as well, and I had like this inkling that someday I will write the book, when I was working on the online course, I was like, well, this is my current project. So it wasn't 100% for sure that I would write a book. I just knew that I really wanted to, but I didn't know if the journey would lead me to that. So I was like, okay, right now I want to teach this technology. I know I have a creative idea of how to teach this in a more simple way for people like me or for other people that learn like me. And so the project at the time was just, how do I build this online course?
Hmm.
Um, and I mean, it's really funny because I haven't talked about this publicly, I don't think, but at the time I was like, oh, I need to learn like a super complicated animation software. And then I need to learn a super complicated video editing software. And I had like all of these blockers because I didn't know any of the softwares.
Hmm.
And I, at the time at my work as a front end dev, I had initially started working with React,
Okay.
which is a front end framework. And then during my job, they switched me onto a team that was going to be using Vue, which is another front end framework.
Yeah.
Um, and I had to learn Vue, and I was going on this website, which I think was called Vue Mastery, which had online courses on how to use Vue, how to
Yeah.
learn Vue. And I loved their videos. So I ended up reaching out to the team and just being like, "Hey, I'm planning on building an online course. What softwares do you guys use for your videos?" And they responded to me, and they were just like, "We use Keynote slides and Keynote animations." And I was like, wait, what? Like, no complicated software? So basically, any reason I had to procrastinate my creative project of building this online course just completely obliterated. And I realized that I don't have any excuses. I just need it. Like Keynote, I can use Keynote. Keynote
Mm-hmm.
animations are super simple.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if this is going into too much detail, but yeah, basically, I started building the course from there on. I was like, okay, there's no need to learn anything complicated. Um, and slowly but surely started recording all the lessons. Um, and also, I told you that I uploaded it to Udemy, but that was not, I didn't know I was going to do that. I was like, do I self publish? I self published and I uploaded to Udemy. I was experimenting and trying to figure out what was going to work best and what was going to work in my situation. So, whenever you tell the story at the end of the journey, it always seems like, oh, yeah, everything was so simple and I figured it all out in one go. But that's definitely not. It was a much messier journey than I may make it out to see when I tell the narrative.
Yeah. No, I love it, and the transparency on top of that is uh, is important because it is very like you just knew that you wanted to consolidate your skills and share it with people, and you went for that, and then you figured out the next step, and nothing was directly clear, and that's I think interesting. And so from this course where you got these new skills, you package your knowledge, and so then you put it out to get feedback, which is like when you're building a project or a project or anything. This is very funny how I mean, it totally relates. And so, at what point did you decide? All right, I'm going to start writing the book, or like, how did the partnership with O'Reilly worked? And maybe if you can discuss a bit about like how do you see writing in general? Like, have you always been writing things, blogs, and so on? How do you go about your writing process, and how did you went about? Okay, I'm going to write the book.
Yeah. Um, okay, these are really great questions, by the way. No, but no other podcasters have asked me these or some of these. Um, so first of all, I have always been a writer. I'd say it is the medium in which I communicate myself the best, and the one that I like to work in. I personally journal, and I've been journaling consistently since I was like 15 years old.
Mm.
I have a lot of journals. So writing is just the way I express myself.
Okay.
And what I would say about when I decided to actually write the book, I think I had the confirmation that my teaching approach worked way before I actually started writing the book. And the one thing I would just say about that for anyone in the audience that might be interested in writing the book is to write a book, you need to have the time and the life space to write a book. So I didn't want to start writing this book until I knew that I had the life design and the mind space to dedicate time to it, because I didn't want to start a project and then just abandon it. Um, at least not with this book. This book was going to be my little baby, and I wanted to like commit. So when my life was ready and I was like in a place where I was like, I can do this creative project and take this on and really commit to it, that's when I started writing the book. Um, and what happened was, I'd reached out to O'Reilly and told them about the fact that I wanted to write this book, and they had told me that they were interested. Um, and that was like March of 2021, I believe.
Hmm.
And then I actually decided not to sign any contracts with them yet and not to actually start a formal relationship, because I decided that I wanted to write the entire first draft of the book on my own. And that's because we can get into this later, about my teaching approach and what my kind of secret sauces, but I use colors in order to teach Git, and I was going to be using the colors of the rainbow to teach Git, and I was going to be using a really like playful, visual, storytelling based teaching methodology, and I just knew that I didn't want anyone to put any limitations on the creative vision that I had for this book. So I told myself, okay, let's write the first draft on my own. And I actually user tested that first draft. And then a year later, so in March of 2022, is when I got back in touch with O'Reilly and was like, all right, I've got the first draft. Are you guys still interested? And they said, yes, we are. And that's when I started the formal relationship with them, signed the contract, started having weekly meetings with a editor, and and then did many, many more drafts of that book. So yeah, that's kind of the journey, of how that happened.
Hmm. That's awesome. And that's super interesting how you had this clear vision of what you wanted for the project. It's very interesting how like the entire story relates to like building a project and pushing it to first users and then getting feedbacks and iterating and but also maybe like having clear of what we don't want and just not jumping too fast in like contracts and business relationships because you want to take the time to consolidate what you have, but not taking the time in a way that you're not testing and getting feedbacks. So that's very interesting. I think I'd like to do a follow up question on writing in general. So, what do you mean by that? So you've been writing since you were young, if I can say that. And so I'm curious about, before getting deeper maybe into the stories or like little nuggets that we can get and take with us and learn. But I myself, I don't identify as a good writer yet. I need to work on that. And so for people who haven't been writing since they were 15, like what's your vision about writing? So you expressed it before, but would you have tips for people who haven't that much experience in writing and like how do you see writing? What process do you use? How do you improve? Do you have things related to writing that can really help us enhance our writing skill? Because at the end, we don't want to sound like ChatGPT every time we want to do like
Yeah.
mails or documentations or anything.
These are really good questions, and I want to be careful with anything I say, because I'm always very careful about advice. So, the first thing I would say is that, writing came very naturally to me.
Hmm.
So, therefore, I don't think I'm actually the best teacher or person to give tips on how to become a better writer. I
Hmm.
think people usually that struggle with something, um, are usually better at teaching it later because they actually know what it's like to not be good at it and then become good at it.
Mm.
Although I would say maybe when I first started journaling, I didn't quite have the it's not the way that I journal now. So the first thing that I want to say is, through writing in a journal, and a journal, the only audience is me. It means that I get to just write all the time without having to edit myself, without having to think. Does this sound good to someone else? So I get a lot of practice. I've never thought of it in that way because for me, it's not practice. It's just the way that I express and process my life. Um, but at the end of the day, I do a lot of writing and I don't spend it's not like I rewrite a sentence. I just free flow, say whatever I want. So, as with almost anything in life, I guess just practice, just doing it a lot,
Hmm.
will make you possibly better at it. But obviously, there's a difference between journaling and writing something that is for an audience. So take that take that thought that I just shared with a grain of salt. Um, but at least with journaling, you can find your own voice and figure out the way that you like to write. I actually write a lot in the similar way that I speak. So I don't write in a very complex way. It's very, very simple. Um, and then I feel like I had something else I wanted to say on this. Mm, I'm not sure. I think that's it. Yeah. So
Awesome.
I'd say just, yeah, I practice a lot in my own time. And so that's how I've figured out my own kind of voice.
Yeah, awesome. If you remember one more thing, jump
Yeah.
in.
I'll let
Keep
you
me
know.
awesome. And so, following up on that, I think I have two questions. Um, the first one being, when you did this first draft, and then you said that you iterated a lot with O'Reilly or the feedback from the people who are reading it. So in this iteration process, from the first draft to the final version, what was it like? What kind of reviews did you get? And how did you approach them in terms of fixing it to improve the book?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked about this because I love talking about this. And I think it's actually one of the reasons that the book is as good as it ended up being. Um, so I actually did the very first round of user testing after finishing the first four chapters. In total, the book has 12 chapters.
Mhm.
And I think the user testing, by the way, I think this is something that I really learned when I was a user experience designer, UX designer. It's just so good to get like feedback and to improve a design. And it really humbles you because you stop believing that you're this like solitary genius that everything you do is incredible. And you learn to get humbled by like, oh, actually, this didn't work for people or people don't get this. So actually, I had done the first four chapters. I've written the first four chapters, and I user tested, and immediately started getting feedback on things that weren't working for people. For example, I told you that I use colors and visuals to teach, and my idea was that people would actually have like a set of colored pencils, and they would reproduce the designs. And that just was not the case. Nobody did that. Nobody wanted to do that. Maybe there are some people out there that would want to, but most people were not interested in that, and so I changed that. Um, I had user tested, then I wrote all the rest of the chapters and I user tested the entire first draft of the book. And this was before I ever actually worked with O'Reilly. So, yeah, I did user test everything before starting to work with them. And then once I started working with O'Reilly, I think I did maybe another two rounds of user testing at various stages of the book. Um, and I think I had between like yeah like almost like 30 user testers throughout all of those rounds of user testing. Ages ranged probably from like 18 until like 60. Backgrounds ranged. Some people had never like were just in a coding boot camp learning to code. Some people were experienced developers, so sometimes they, for example, could give me some like technical feedback. Um, uh, yeah, and like some people were technical writers, some people were developers, data scientists. So it was important to get like a huge diversity in the actual user testers themselves as well. And I got tons of feedback. Actually, to be honest, that's what probably took the longest. I mean, writing the first draft of the book didn't take that long. Um, r- Iterating on the draft of the book and incorporating user feedback is what took really, really long. And I think even the user feedback ended up getting me to write extra chapters for the book. And uh, One of the really important things was I'm a Mac user, so I definitely needed feedback from Windows users because sometimes there were things that I needed to explain for them. So yeah, it's the best thing whenever people ask me like what they should do if they want to write a technical book. especially for technical books. Obviously, other kinds of books are different, but for technical books, I'm like definitely user test. My book is a hands-on learning experience. We haven't quite mentioned that, but yeah, it's you actually work on a project in the book, and there's these sections called follow along sections. So you're actually like following along with the commands in the book. So it's also very easy to user test, because it's like, yeah, it's a hands-on learning experience. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Awesome. I love how this is a very niche problem. I mean, yeah, in a way, but the concepts applied in the development of the book are like can apply to any kind of project to make sure that it's going to be the best thing one can build out there. So I love it. Maybe I'm curious about the users. So how do you find the first people who are going to read the book, maybe multiple times? How do you identify the different profiles that needs to review the book? Do you had help from O'Reilly? Did you had it clear since the beginning? Do you have insights on that?
Yeah, so the user testing I did all on my own. That wasn't something that I did like through O'Reilly per se. To be honest, I wasn't all that picky. What I just did is I was in a couple like Slack communities.
Yeah.
One of them was for technical writers. One of them was for people learning to code. Maybe there were a couple more, and I just posted in there, and I just said, "Hey, I'm writing this book. I need user testers. If you're interested, it's a win-win situation because you get a free learning resource to learn Git, and I get user feedback. So if you're interested, go ahead and let me know. And I would do like an initial call with them to explain things a bit more. And it was like a little bit of a funnel in the sense that you'll get like a bunch of people that say they're interested, but then the amount of people that actually do it is like, I don't know, 20%, 30%. I don't know what percentage because I can't quite remember the numbers. But
Mhm.
obviously, people have busy lives and they don't always have time to do all the things they want to do. So more people will say that they're interested. But in the end, I had enough people that actually did it and gave me feedback. Um, yeah.
That's awesome. Falling on the Slack communities or like, do you have names or do you have things that really helped you? Maybe.
Yeah, one of the communities, and I'm friends with the person that runs it, is called Code Bar, and
Okay.
it's a community just helping people learn to code. And then the technical writing community is basically this biggest Slack community for technical writers called Write the Docs.
Hmm.
So those were my two kind of communities that I relied on at the time.
Hmm. Awesome. Awesome. I think I'd like to tackle creativity. So you had this first idea
Okay.
of using colors and so on. You have the writing. You started around UX. So maybe before creativity, or maybe you can relate both. But I'm curious about. Yeah, because I'm thinking the feedback of all the users might be a very helpful thing to just improve in terms of writing, even though like there is a practice part, just trying to making things easier to understand, uh, and having the real time feedback, not necessarily real time, but having the feedback that okay, this is clear now. I understand the concept, but I need more information on this. So you add that. I think that's super powerful. So like having feedbacks, I'm trying to take this for myself. Like if I write more and if I get feedback on what I write, or if I get more engagements, maybe I'm getting better at writing and explaining concepts. How important is it? How important is creativity when you try to teach something, either in the format or in the way you say it, or in the writing if it is a written content? Do you have insights regarding that?
That's a good question. I don't think I have anything revelatory. For me, using storytelling is always very helpful in being creative and teaching something.
Hmm.
So I'll just give the example of my book. Throughout my book, basically what you're doing is you're working on a broad project where you're listing the colors of the rainbow.
Okay.
And in the first part of the book, so basically what happens is you're working on the rainbow repository, and you say the first line in your one file in your project when you start off is red is the first color of the rainbow. And you make a commit, and a commit is a version of your project. Most of your audience will probably know what a commit is, but
Yeah.
just in case.
Thanks.
And then the commit that I have in the diagrams where I visualize what Git looks like and how it works is a circle that's red. And then you continue working on that project, and I start introducing other features of Git. So the second commit will be, orange is the second color of the rainbow, and then you make the orange commit. And the whole like secret sauce of my teaching methodology is that then I can refer to the commits, like the red commit, the orange commit, without having to refer to the commit hash. And for
Mm.
anybody that might not know, commit hashes are these 40 characters of letters and numbers that are like a unique name for each commit.
Hmm.
So, okay, so you're working on this project, and then later in the book, it's kind of a story because you're working on the colors of the rainbow, adding the colors of the rainbow to your repo, and then once we start talking about collaboration, I pretend that you have a friend that is going to start helping you work on this project, and we start simulating what it would be like to have two people working on this project. So the entire book is just one story of you, and then later you and your friend listing the colors of the rainbow. And at the end, you're also listing colors that are not part of the rainbow because I ran out of colors. Um, but yeah, it's just one long story. And for me, this was creative in a sense. I also had to be creative in how I want to teach Git, thinking about, okay, I I very intentionally chose to use the colors of the rainbow and to use .txt, so just text files, not even markdown, and there's no code in the entire book. And that was an intentional creative decision because I thought to myself, what is the purpose of this book? It's to teach Git. Therefore, I will abstract away and take away anything that could confuse people or make that learning experience more complicated. And therefore, I decided not to have any code in the book because if I had code that was like HTML or whatever or JavaScript, that would be for like web developers. But that would mean that anybody learning Git that's not a web developer might get confused because they're like, I don't know this, this language. These file types are unfamiliar to me. So um, yeah, it was just about finding creative solutions. So my creative solution to that was like, we're going to use text files. We're not going to use any code. Um, so yeah, I think just it's all about finding kind of creative solutions, whether through storytelling or through problem solving, to to solve whatever problem you're trying to solve.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I love it. And I like how I think this is another like very important rule that can be applied to anything. It's like, okay, what am I trying to achieve? This one thing. How can I stop overcomplicate everything? How can I make things easier and easier so that my main goal is the one that is being pushed and I don't interfere with other things? So I think in a project development, you can apply it like, okay, what kind of value do I want to add to users? Okay, that. So let's just focus on that. And the smoother is going to be the experience, the better is going to be the UX experience. Yeah, the experience user is going to be better at the end. And that's funny because you started in UX, and so it seems that the overall approach of your writing and how you write is related to the end user experience, which is I think a very interesting mindset because in the end, I always see UX as like psychology and like how can I put myself in the shoes of the majority of people. And like you said, it's hard if we haven't faced the problems because we've been practicing something for the last 20 years or 15 years or 10 years or even 3 years. And so we assume that things that are difficult at the start, we take them for granted. And from this from this individual fact, it's very hard to just share like too much reality of how can I help the most people to achieve my goal because we just struggle identifying like important things that we would need to explain or we would need to have in our project, um, because we don't understand well enough our users or whatever that we're trying to do. So I
Yeah.
really like this insight.
I another thing that actually I was reflecting on this. Another thing that kind of seeped into my book writing project from my user experience design experience was the fact that when I made the first prototype of the book, it was actually made in an old design software which I used back when I was a UX designer, which apparently people don't use that much anymore, but it's called Sketch.
Mm.
People use Figma nowadays, apparently, but and I still need to start just using Figma. But I made the very first prototype of the book in that software. And one of the things you learn as a UX designer, or some UX designers learn, I guess, is being okay with making like a really horrible initial prototype. Like it doesn't have to look good. I mean, sometimes you prototype just on paper, and then go to like some to software. But just this idea of not being a perfectionist and being okay with having something that doesn't look great and is ugly. Like the first versions of my book were in black and white. They were ugly. They were messy. Um, but being okay with that messy process. I mean, it's the same with, I sometimes think of the way that I wrote this book as like the same way that people build an app. Like they make a prototype, they get feedback, they iterate on that prototype, then they add more features. Then in the end, maybe they do like the final touches to like fix the UI, like so it's perfect and all the colors work and stuff like that. But just, yeah. Since we talked about the user testing, the other thing about prototyping and being okay with also being okay with just scrapping stuff. Like this didn't work, you have to be okay with it just going into the like idea graveyard or like your, I don't know, chapter graveyard and being like, okay, this is not working, we're gonna change it. Yeah, so just to add a little bit to kind of what you were chatting about.
Amazing. That's a great reminder. And I think the bigger the graveyard, the better quality the work in general, because you have more experience on what worked, what didn't, why, and so on. And so that's such an important thing. And even though those are like over rules that we kind of hear many times, applying them is like very, it's a different thing. And
Yeah.
like being okay, just letting go of, okay, goodbye, speaking for myself, but like goodbye to all these lines, goodbye to this, and I just need to goodbye to this architecture that I built and that I'm very proud of. Maybe I'll reuse it later, but this is not the time. And yeah, like finding the shortest path to like what am I going to what I'm trying to test right now, what feedback do I want, what I'm looking for, to know if I need to pursue or to continue iterating on this or not. And I think sometimes we get caught up just by the sexiness of the architecture, the design, the whatever we work in, and we got caught up in that, and we don't put the most important work to just know if we need to keep iterating or change, pivot, or whatever we want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Awesome. So maybe I think I have one more question before going into the end episode questions,
Hmm.
which is if you had to start all over again, but you keep your experience right now, so meaning you've already wrote this entire book and so on, but like you're writing a new book from scratch, how would you approach it? Maybe in the different, so maybe tech stack if you find it relevant, like Figma or like some tools that you might use, like what do you use to write, even though it might not be as the latest tools, but if you have like your own experience on that, and then like how would you approach it, how would you frame it, how would you get user like based on all the lessons you learn, you need to redo everything from scratch, how do you do it?
Okay, I don't think I'm gonna give you an answer that you expect or that is maybe as helpful as it could be. But to be honest, I spent so many hours of my life rereading every chapter and just fixing like a comma here, a period here, a word here, and actually being the perfectionist I told you that you should really not be in the process.
Yeah.
And I realized at the very end of the process, we had O'Reilly has had like a freelance copy editor go through that throughout the entire book and basically take care of all of that. And that's when I realized what a waste of time that was, that I sat and did like every comma and period and yeah, what do they say in English? They say like dot the I's and cross the T's. Um, and I just realized like I shouldn't have spent so much time just on that. So I would do that differently. The other thing, let me think. Is there anything else? Um, I can't think of anything else that I'd say I'd do differently. Um, I'm happy with the process that I took, and yeah, at least that's what
Awesome.
I think now. If anything comes to me, then maybe I'll mention it if we still have a little bit of time in the episode. But other than that, I yeah can't think of anything else.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's pretty clear. Yeah, you just validate your ID. Like, does are people interested in that? To build a course, so you would build a course. Then you'll be like, okay, I have very good feedbacks. Yes.
There's one thing, but this isn't about the process. It's just that I didn't cover forking in the book, and I kind of wish I had. So
Oh,
that's just one thing that I'm like, I should have done that. Anyways, but yeah, sorry. I
awesome.
just remembered that and I could not hide it.
Yeah. That's that's honest. Yeah. So yeah, I see. So you have that. Then you test your ID. Then you have positive feedback. So you iterate. You start playing with possibilities of contracts and like how to publish it and so on. But you mainly focus on the core of what you want to build. And then once you have it, you iterate. You find yourself users that have different profiles. You have your funnel, like you said. Not everyone or every like all the people that say, "Yeah, I want to review," won't review it. So you're okay with that. You're okay with being disappointed on those steps. You're okay about the like you try to not be a perfectionist. And I said try because we all get into the details and we get lost some days. And after 4 hours, you're like, hmm, I lost. Maybe I'm not lost, but I learned the lesson, and I hope I won't do this again. And then you iterate, and you don't try to fix all the details because someone will do it at the end, hopefully, for you. So you don't spend hours and hours doing that. Awesome, and that's super helpful. So following up, I have three little questions to close to kind of close and close this episode. But first of all, before asking them, I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And if you're still listening, thank you very much. I hope this is very helpful. So feel free to subscribe or share a comment or give a like if you really enjoy this content or if you have any question. That being said, my three following up questions are maybe I'll do two, but first of all, where can people learn more about you? Is it LinkedIn? Do you have a website, or what are you doing lately, and where can people engage or learn more about yourself?
Yeah. Okay. The first thing I'll say is that I'm the only Anna Skoulikari in the world that I know of. So if you just Google my name or you try to like look up my name on any of the platforms, you'll probably find me. And I'll just spell out my last name because it's Greek and well, yeah. So it's Anna Anna, and then my last name is Skoulikari Skoulikari. At the moment, I'm most active on, I guess, LinkedIn. And I also have a website, annaskoulikari.com. But these things are always in constant flux. So, like, I do have a YouTube and Twitter, and maybe some other things. But yeah, I would say LinkedIn, my website. My website, you'll find like all the places that I'm on. Um, and otherwise, just look me up on any platform and you'll see if I'm there or not, or if I'm active or not. I'm not that much on social media. Maybe that will change in the future, but yeah, I'd say that that gives people some guidance.
Awesome. Second question, and I'll do three. So this is the one before the last one.
Okay.
So I think I'd like to ask you, for anyone who is getting into the field, either it's UX, UI, or they're interested in technical writing. Um, I know you're not into advice in general, but is there something that you wish you could tell yourself when you were younger and you were getting started and before figuring different things out? And I'm sure you're still figuring things out. I feel like this is how life works. But would you say something to yourself if you could too?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I do have something to say on this. I guess, at least for myself, I would have said that it's okay to try out lots of different things until you find the thing that suits you and suits your skills. I think technical writing is the right match for me. And I'm glad that I didn't just stop at being a UX designer or a front end developer, and that I tried different things and was willing to kind of career pivot. Um, so I would have said that to me. I don't know if I should say that to everyone, but maybe some people out there want to hear that. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's super important. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I feel like there is no. I think everyone is unique in a way that I truly believe that everyone have something they're great at, and it's just a matter of how big is my graveyard ID, IDs, and like the bigger it is, the higher the probability of me making sure like this one thing is what I really want to pursue and keep on. And I feel like, except for a small percentage, uh, the majority of the people needs to figure this out, and through repetition and IDs and testing and yeah. So I think that's a very interesting message that applies to almost everyone, I guess. Last question is, would you have a message? Do you have a message for the Let's K community? And by that, it can be anything that we discuss in the episodes. It can be something totally different. Just if you want to share something else with us.
Ooh, I think I'm going to share something which is really generic, but I guess it'd just be it's okay to follow your curiosity. When you're curious about something, listen to that. And then maybe just one more thing, which is it's also I've found it that life is a lot funner when you just look at things a bit more playfully, and um, yeah, being playful in life. That's it.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I like the idea of planning, and but in the end, you just try to iterate, and try to figure things out. And so it's okay if my plan doesn't work, and I don't give too much importance to the plan itself. I just give importance to like, am I taking the right actions to follow it, and is the plan still okay? And if not, I'll just change my plan. And yeah, I think that's something that I personally helped me a lot. And so, yeah, I relate to that. Thank you very much. I hope that you had a great time and everyone else did. And I wish to see you on another episode for the people who are listening or watching this episode on YouTube. And Anna, thanks for coming on the show. I wish you to have an amazing day.
Thank you so much for having me.